Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Unparalleled Universe for another action figure comparison video. And today's topic of discussion is who do I think made the best Boba Fett figure. And in this video, we're mostly going to be talking about 6-inch scale figures with one exception. But for the most part, it's going to be 6-inch scale. I know that there's a lot of awesome Boba Fett figures out there in different scales, but I mostly collect 6-inch and 7-inch scales. So that's what we're going to focus on in here today. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And as you can see here, we have 5 different Boba Fett figures. Starting from the right, we have the original Hasbro Black Series version. Next up, we have the S.H Figuarts. In the center, we have the Mafex Empire Strikes Back version. And then we have the Hasbro Black Series Return of the Jedi version. And then finally, we have the Diamond Select Return of the Jedi Boba Fett. And out of these 5 Boba Fett figures, I would say that there's really only 3 that are in contention for the top spot. The other 2 are going to be put into the runner-up category. But I wanted to include them in this video because I think they're important. And honestly, I think all 5 of these figures are great, so I wanted to show all of them a little bit of love. But let's go ahead and get into the runner-up. So the first figure in the runner-up category is the original Black Series Boba Fett, and I still feel like this is a really good looking figure, and I think that it holds up in regards to sculpt. It does start to feel a little old when you pick them up and start playing with it, because Black Series has come so far with the articulation. Something like this kind of feels like a dinosaur, but he's still a great looking figure. And if you're looking for a Boba Fett that'll just look badass on your shelf, this guy will definitely do the job. But the sculpting work on him is really nice. I like the way they did a soft goods cape. I think he's the only one on the list that has a soft goods cape actually, so that makes him unique from the other ones, so I do like that. His jetpack is removable, which is something that we don't see on all the Boba Fett figures. It's kind of unique to Black Series, but that's something that I like because it gives you some display options. You could take that off and do different things, so that is dope. As far as accessories, he does come with his 2 guns. He's got his rifle, which as you can see, it's kind of warped because the way that he's been holding it. I pretty much have had him on my shelf like that for years, ever since he came out. And then he also has his little handgun type of blaster. So he does come with the accessories that he needs for this version of Boba Fett. But yeah, like I said, he's a really good looking figure. He just doesn't hold up that well in terms of articulation. That's why I don't think that he really had a shot at the top spot, but I still think that he's a great looking figure and he's worth showing some love, because for the longest time he was the only 6-inch Boba Fett. He was the only option, and I think that he held it down for plenty of years until the Mafex one came out. But the Mafex one was way more expensive, so this guy was still a pretty reasonable option. But yeah, I think this is a really nice looking figure. And the next figure in the runner-up category is the Diamond Select Boba Fett. And look, I don't care what anybody says about Diamond Select. I know a lot of people like to complain about them. In most cases, those complaints are warranted. But in this case, they absolutely killed it with this figure. And it was a complete surprise from the release to the actual figure. This guy kind of just popped up out of nowhere. There was no prior announcement. He just showed up in the Disney store and you were able to go get him or buy him on the website or whatever. But then, you know, when you think like, okay, Diamond Select is coming out with the Boba Fett figure, it's going to look pretty good, but it's not going to articulate that much. It's not going to be very posable, probably not going to be very fun to play around with. But that was not the case with this guy. As soon as I took him out of the box, I was kind of blown away. Not because he's like the most articulated Boba Fett figure out there, but just because he has a lot more articulation than I was expecting from a Diamond Select Boba Fett, especially in the torso. His torso is probably... it's like probably second best on this list because it just moves so much. I really like the way they did it. And I mean, it's a character with an armor chest plate, so you're not going to get like a full ab crunch. But I think as far as what Boba Fett's design allows, I think they pretty much maximized on that. So I really like what they did here with the articulation. The legs move pretty good. The only place where they kind of drop the ball with the articulation is the arms. Like the arms, you can't really do much with. They've got like very simple shoulders that pretty much just go up and out. There's no like upper bicep swivel or anything like that. He's got single jointed elbows. There's a swivel at the elbow, so that's cool. But you know, the arms just feel very limited. And if the arms were better, he would have had a better chance at the actual top spot because everything else is really nice. I like the details on him. I like the dinged up look to the armor. I like all the different colors. The shoulder pad even has some really nice like battle damage and wear on it. It looks great. So as far as the look goes, he's up there, man. This could have, if we were just going based on looks, he might have been like number 1 or 2 for me. You know, he might have been up there, but there's just, you know, the articulation just wasn't quite enough to give him a real shot at the top spot. And one other thing is the fact that he's 7-inch scale. Now, I don't mind 7-inch scale figures. You know, obviously I like to collect Diamond Select and NECA and stuff like that. But with Boba Fett, you know, he's a part of Star Wars, obviously, and the big appeal when it comes to Star Wars, in my opinion, is like the vast amount of characters that they have. So just to have one character from this big, huge universe in this scale is kind of unappealing, you know? If Diamond Select came along and said, we're gonna give you a whole line of Star Wars figures, or maybe just Mandalorian-based figures, I think that would be cool, but they just kind of threw him out there and Darth Maul. Those two characters don't even necessarily go together. It was kind of random. I think it would have been nice if they gave us Boba Fett and then like Han Solo or maybe Mando or just something that would look cool along with him. As it is right now, he's kind of alone and you can't really mix him in with your other Star Wars figures because he's so much taller than like Black Series or Mafex. You know, he's a giant next to them, so he's kind of just alone out there. So those were really the two reasons why he ended up in the runner-up category. If he was the same scale as Black Series and he had better arm articulation, this guy would have definitely had a chance at being number one because I really love the way that he looks, and aside from the arms, he has really good articulation, he's a lot of fun to play with, and he did come with some really cool accessories. So, you know, even though he's not the best Boba Fett out there, man, you have to applaud Diamond Select for this one because they really killed it. I love this figure, I'll be honest with you. I really love this thing. And so now that we have the runner-ups out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this comparison with these three figures. And what we have here is the Mafex version, the S.H Figuarts, and then the recently released Star Wars Black Series. And it's going to be very difficult for me to determine exactly which one of these figures I like the most because each one of them is great and each one of them has something unique going for itself that maybe the other two don't. So this is going to be a tough one, but let's go ahead and get into it, starting off with the sculpt, the paint, the look, and the overall design. So starting off with the S.H Figuarts, I think this is a really good looking figure. They did a great job with the sculpt. There's a bunch of sculpted detail throughout the whole figure. The joints are very well hidden, but they're still pretty functional for the most part. And I also really like the colors on this guy. I like how the yellow of the shoulder pads and the knee pads kind of pop against the gray and the green. The jetpack looks really good too. As you can see, they did a great job sculpting it, and it does have a bunch of really nice colors on there. The cape is a hard piece of plastic, but it just kind of sits behind the back and it doesn't get in the way too much at all. So I think they did a good job with the cape. I'm not a big fan of how they did the Wookiee hair. It's just kind of a loose piece and it's actually removable. So I mean, one positive side to that is that you could kind of change up the look a little bit. So that's definitely a silver lining to the way they did this. But I'm really not a big fan of how they kept this a separate piece because when you have it up here and you start moving the arm around, the Wookiee hair can fall into the gap that is created in the shoulder when you're moving it around. And when that happens, it just kind of gets frustrating. You got to dig it out. It's not a big deal, but I think the other two figures handled it a little bit better, and we'll check those out when we look at those figures. But yeah, for the most part, I think this is a good looking figure. He does have a lot of nice detail, but unfortunately, a lot of the detail is hidden because he doesn't have a whole lot of paint applications. And as a result, it kind of makes him feel a little less movie accurate than the other two. It kind of comes across as like an animated version of Boba Fett or something like that. And I think that's cool, but if we're going for movie accuracy, I feel like the lack of paint really hurts this figure and it kind of missed the mark, you know? Like, it doesn't feel as movie accurate as it should, in my opinion. It looks like a stylized version of Boba Fett. But I do think it looks good, and I like the way that it kind of stands out amongst the other Boba Fett figures. But again, if we're looking for movie accuracy, I don't think that you're gonna find it here with this S.H Figuarts. I mean, some of the details might be movie accurate, but I'm just saying, as far as capturing like a realistic look from the movie, I don't know if this guy does it as well. Another thing that I'm not crazy about is how low the head sits, and that's a common problem when it comes to S.H Figuarts figures like this. I just don't know if it looks very realistic the way that it's sitting right here. But yeah, and another thing that's kind of funny about this figure, and it just kind of makes me think that they didn't really care about accuracy at all, is the way that they did the arm wires. So as you can see, both of these other figures have these arm wires, and that's kind of like something that Boba Fett pretty much always has. It's like these different arm wires, and every company found a different way to deal with it, but Figuarts, they just decided not to even include it. So that's kind of hilarious to me, and I don't mind it because a lot of times these things are at risk of breaking or whatever, but when it comes to the Figuarts, you don't have to worry about it. But again, it just kind of makes me feel like they didn't really care too much about movie accuracy. And just to clarify, it does have a little bit of paint details. Like you could see that some of the paint is scraped off from the helmet here, but it looks very factory and not natural. Like on some of the other figures, the battle damage and scuffs and everything looks very natural, and that's not really the case with this figure. But I do like the way this figure looks. I just feel that it's not as movie accurate as the other versions of Boba Fett. And next up, we have the Mafex version. And when it comes to paint, sculpt, details, and movie accuracy, this thing absolutely kills it. In my opinion, he's the most screen accurate out of all the Boba Fett figures that we see here. They did such a great job at bringing this version of Boba Fett to life, and it's crazy how realistic he looks considering that he's all sculpted plastic. There's very few things here that interrupt the illusion. I would say that maybe just the shoulder joints and the elbows, but aside from those two things, this guy looks like he jumped right out of the movie. I love the way that the head looks. I think the proportions are very well done. The helmet actually looks like it has a head inside of it, so that's really good. He does have a bunch of dings in the armor, and it all looks very natural, you know, like when compared to the Figuarts version that is very clean and not so good looking. When you look at the Mafex one, it all looks like it's actual battle damage and not like it was just painted on in a factory or something like that. So they did a great job with the paint work. The jetpack does look nice too. Obviously, this is based on the way that he looked in The Empire Strikes Back, so it's not as colorful as he looked in Return of the Jedi in regards to the jetpack, but you know, you could still see that it's very well sculpted and has a lot of nice detail. So they did a great job with that. And just in general, I think everything was executed very well here. I like the way they handled the Wookiee hair up here, and it actually covers up the ball joint at the shoulder, so it makes it look even better, so that's nice. One area that really highlights the difference that paintwork could do is the lower legs, because Boba Fett has these little utensils in his little shin pouch or whatever you want to call it, and on the Mafex figure they did a great job at painting it and making it look lifelike. And if you compare it to the other two figures, they didn't do such a great job on it, neither one of them, and you can almost not even see those things. But on the Mafex one, they stand out, they look good, they look realistic. So that's just one area where I feel like you could see the drastic differences. And just in general, I think this is a really good looking figure, and when it comes to the look and the design of a figure, I feel like this guy pretty much has no flaws. So next up, we have the Black Series Return of the Jedi version by Hasbro, and I really think that Hasbro did a great job with the overall look of this figure. In my opinion, he does look movie accurate, he does have realistic proportions, they did a good job with the head size. It's always important to get the head size right when it comes to Boba Fett figures, because if it's too big or too small, it could throw the whole thing off. In this case, I do think that Hasbro did a good job with it. I will say that I don't think that it's as good as it is on the Mafex version. I kind of like the size of the helmet on the Mafex one a little bit more, but I still think that Hasbro did a good job with it, and most importantly, it does look realistic. It looks as if an actual human head can fit inside of that helmet, and that's really the goal. So they did a great job with that. And just in general, I think this is a really good looking figure. He's got a lot of nice sculpting work. Unfortunately, some of the sculpting work doesn't stand out as good as it should because of the lack of paint detail. So I really think it would have been nice if they added some paint wash on the legs and on the arms. If they had done that, it would have brought out that sculpt and it would have made the figure look that much better. But as it is, there's still a lot of nice work on here. They did a good job with the wire thing on the elbows too. It's on a separate shifting piece, so you could just kind of move it around as you move the arm around, and you don't really have to worry about messing it up or anything. So I think they handled that well. And I do like that his belt kind of shifts around so it doesn't get in the way of the articulation, because that's not really the case with like the Mafex one, or it kind of shifts around but it's really tight on there, so you don't have a whole lot of play. And then on the Figuarts version, it doesn't really move around at all. It's kind of just stuck onto the hips there. I think they did a great job on the jetpack as well. It's got a lot of nice colors, a lot of nice detail, and another thing that I love about the jetpack is the fact that it's removable. So that is awesome, and it adds some display options to your Boba Fett. So even though I think Hasbro did a great job with the sculpting work on Boba Fett, I will say that it doesn't quite match the sculpting work on the Mafex one. The Mafex one has so much detail, so much paint work, and it just looks more realistic. It looks amazing to me. And the Hasbro one is really good as well, but he's not quite up there with the Mafex one. I would say the Mafex one definitely looks better and more realistic, more lifelike, and just more detailed, you know? They just killed it. The Hasbro one did a great job too, but it's just not at that level. When you compare them to the Figuarts one, I don't know, it's weird. They're both Boba Fett figures, obviously, but it's like comparing a cartoon version against the movie version. So, you know, Compared to the Figuarts one, I'm not even really sure what to say because it's like almost like a different thing, you know. But I will say that the Black Series one does look more movie-like and more realistic than the Figuarts one, that's for sure, but doesn't quite catch the Mafex one. Okay, so when it comes to the overall look and design, in my opinion, I think the Mafex one looks the best out of the three, out of the five actually. I would say that the Mafex one is definitely the best looking Boba Fett figure, the most realistic, and I think they just did a great job with the way that he looks. So in this category, it's gonna go to the Mafex version. And as far as the accessories go, starting off with the Mafex version, he really doesn't come with a whole lot. He does come with his 2 guns, and then we have some different sets of hands. The Figuarts version comes with pretty much the same stuff, but a little bit more. And then last but not least, the Black Series version does not come with any extra hands, unfortunately, but he does come with a bunch of other really cool stuff. So personally, I think that I prefer the accessories that come with the Black Series version. I think they're just more creative and unique, especially that broken blaster. I think that's dope. The flame effects are awesome. As far as the accessories go, I'm gonna give it to the Black Series version. Alright, so now for the articulation, I'm gonna do my best to discuss all of the important aspects of the articulation on these 3 figures and how they compare to each other. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting off with the heads. So the Mafex version does have very good movement at the head. As you can see, he does have the side-to-side movement. It could swivel back and forth. It could look up to about right there, and it could look down to right there. It does have the typical import style neck where we have movement at the lower neck and at the upper neck. So he does have good range there. And then the Black Series version has a very similar head and neck setup where the movement is at the lower neck and at the upper neck. So he gets a lot of good movement as well. And what's interesting about the way they did the Black Series neck is that depending on which way you have the neck facing is going to determine like how much range you get. So I have it facing forward right now, and as you could see, he could look way down. He could actually look down more than the Mafex one and more than the Figuarts one. But then if you spin the neck, or actually if it's just like that and you try to get him to look up, he can only look up to about right there, which is not very much. But then if you spin the neck around and spin the head around, as you could see, he looks way up, which is awesome. And this is very helpful when it comes to flight poses. So if you have him like that, he looks up to about right there, and the Mafex one only looks up to about right there. Can't really even get close, to be honest with you. And then for the Figuarts version, let's go ahead and take a look at his head and neck setup. He does have a similar head and neck setup to these 2 figures, but it gets less range because of how low the head is. And when you try to kind of move it around, the helmet collides with the armor around the collar here. So, you know, he might benefit from getting a longer neck peg or something, kind of like the Mando figure. But yeah, it's a similar setup, but it's not as functional. But as far as looking up goes, he could actually look up a pretty good amount. So he could look up to about right there. But yeah, as you can see, the Black Series version can definitely look up the most. And like I said, that's very useful when you're trying to get him into flight poses. And these guys just don't get the same amount. So that's pretty dope right there. And then next up, let's talk about the torsos. So as far as the torsos go, starting with the Black Series, he does have a diaphragm cut, which gets some nice side to side. And then you could kind of move it around like that. You could get it to go back to about right there. And the plastic cape does not get in the way at all because it's soft plastic, so that's very important as well. You can only go forward to about right there, and then the overlay kind of stops it a little bit. So not a whole lot of crunch forward, but he does have an armored chest plate, so you know, it is what it is. At least in general, it does feel like it can move around. It doesn't feel stiff. He does feel like you could get him into good poses with that torso. You just can't really crunch it forward all that much. And then the Figuarts is pretty similar in terms of the torso, because his torso actually gets some pretty good movement. He has a diaphragm cut and then a ball joint at the waist, and using both of those, his movement forward is pretty much the same as the Black Series version, which I think is pretty decent, but it's not a whole lot, you know. It doesn't go back as much though, mostly because the jetpack is there and it's not removable, so it does hinder the articulation a little bit. The cape is soft plastic, so that doesn't really bother the articulation too much, so that's a good thing. It does get some pretty good side to side, and you can rotate, but it does get a little tight. But still, I would say that the torso on the Figuarts one is actually pretty decent. And then next we have the Mafex one, which I feel probably has the worst torso movement out of the three of them, because he has too much going on here and it's just kind of hard to move him. And I think even if this wasn't here though, like, he still wouldn't move that much, because even if you shift it, even if you shift that, it still like seems like the torso wouldn't have got much movement at all. Does get a little side to side, which is nice. Can't really go back at all because of the jetpack, and his cape is really stiff plastic, so it does get in the way. Can't really get his, like, you know, when you're moving his arms around, it kind of gets in the way, as well as the torso. So as far as the torso movement goes, I would say that it's pretty even between the Figuarts and the Black Series. Maybe give the slight edge to the Black Series for the torso. Now the arms are pretty interesting because they all kind of approached it in a different way. Let's go ahead and start off with the Mafex. So he does have the typical Mafex shoulder kind of joint where it's like the long ball peg in there, and it does get some pretty good movement. But on this side, as I mentioned before, he does have the stiff cape, so it kind of gets in the way of the arm articulation on this side. And then over here, he's got like the Wookiee hair and other stuff going on, so it does have like a joint that should kind of function somewhat like a butterfly joint, but it really doesn't move around all that much. He does have upper bicep swivel though, so that's good. But the way they did it here, like, his torso piece is pretty stiff, so there's no play in there, so it's very hard to get his arms in front of him. And that's something that I always think is important. And it's important for Boba Fett too, because you want him to be able to touch like his controls on his arm and stuff like that. And even though he does have the bicep swivel, he can't really get it going. Like, he can't really reach the arms right there. And you can't like shift this over to help him out at all. So as it is right now, he can't really reach the controls on his arm. And that, I think, is kind of weak. I mean, if you bring it in like that, even still, like, doesn't really work. But if you look at the Black Series version, even though technically the arm kind of has less going on, it still feels more functional. So like a lot of the new Black Series figures, it does have the butterfly joint, so you could bring his arm back a really good amount. And as I said, the cape doesn't really get in the way. But more importantly, you could bring his arm forward a really good amount, because his overlay is soft. So you could get his arms in front of him, and you could bring the arm to right there, and you could get him to touch his controls very easily. Like, it's no hassle at all. Even when his arm is like all the way on this side, you could pretty much get the opposite arm, the right arm, to reach over and touch the controls. He doesn't have an upper bicep swivel or anything like that, but we do get the swivel at the elbow. And we'll talk about the elbows in just a second here. But yeah, I think the way that worked out was better on the Black Series version. Let's see how it worked out on the Figuarts one. So the Figuarts one, I mean, their shoulder's kind of crazy because they have the shoulder pad on there, and you kind of have to drop it down in order to move his arm around. So once you do that, you can bring his arm out to the side pretty good amount. The other two figures can also bring their arms out to the side a really good amount. I forgot to mention that, but let me go ahead and show that real quick. Both of these figures are able to bring their arms out to the side, even though their shoulder pads are right there. Doesn't really hinder the arm coming out. He does have an upper bicep swivel, but it's really, really tight. I haven't been able to get mine. I'm kind of afraid that I'm going to break it, but let's see. I'm not going to force it right now. Well, maybe I will. There we go. So he could bend his arm to about right there, and then yeah, you could make it work to where he could touch his controls. It's not as fluid and as nice as the Black Series, but you could make it work a little bit better than the Mafex one. You can't get him to touch his controls while he's shooting anything out or anything though. Like, he can't reach over like that. He has to bring his arm way in order to reach the controls on his arms. So yeah, that's kind of interesting that the Black Series was able to achieve that aspect better than the other two. But now for the elbows. The Black Series version does have single jointed elbows, but they get pretty good range. Not as good as a double joint, but still pretty decent. Like, the fact that it gets that much range, you know, I don't really miss a double joint right there. I think it's fine how it is. But the figure arts definitely gets a lot more. Look at that. That's nice right there. So he definitely has a lot more range at the elbow. The Mafex one, he gets more range as well. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty close to the Black Series one, right? Probably a little bit more. Yeah, I would say for the elbows, you know, the figure arts definitely wins that. I think for the legs, they all pretty much, I mean, at the hips, they're all pretty much the same. You know, like they all pretty much get the same kind of range. Yeah, so it's about the same on these two figures. The Mafex one probably gets a little more because he is the only one out of the three figures with the drop down hips. So yeah, actually, as far as the hips go, Mafex did a better job with the hips. But, you know, for a character like Boba Fett, I don't know if the hips matter too much. I would say all the hips on these figures are perfectly fine for Boba Fett, but on the Mafex one, they definitely get the most range because he has the drop down feature. I was kind of disappointed that the figure arts one didn't have any type of drop down hip or anything like that, or telescoping hip like the Mandalorian figure. Just kind of regular hips, but they still get pretty decent movement, but not as good as the Mafex one. Alright, so I think the last important thing to discuss is probably the knees. So as far as the knees go, the figure arts one does have double jointed knees, which get a really good bend. The Black Series one does not have double jointed knees, which does kind of suck, so that only bends to about right there. So as you can see, the figure arts one definitely has better knee bend than the Black Series. And then the Mafex does have double jointed knees as well, which get a really good range, pretty much the same as on the figure arts figure. All three figures have pretty functional rocking ankles. I would say that the Mafex and the Black Series version have the best ankles. The figure arts one, they rock, but they don't get as much range as the other two, but they're fine. At least they do rock. And then the very last thing to discuss are the toes. So the figure arts and the Mafex both have articulating toes. Oh. Yeah, so there you go. The Black Series does not. I like the articulated toe. It's definitely helpful to get the figures into like natural looking walking poses and things like that. So it would be cool if Hasbro started to implement that, but as it is right now, they do not. So as far as the articulation goes, I think it's pretty interesting because the Black Series version has way less points of articulation than the other two, but I would say that his articulation is a lot more functional and he's way funner to handle than either the Mafex one or the figure arts one. The figure arts one has a lot of really good articulation, but some things just don't work as well as they should. And then the Mafex one has some really good articulation, but there's a lot of things that kind of get in the way. Like you have that cape, which is a very stiff plastic, and it kind of gets in the way of the arm and the torso movement, and then he has the pouches around his waist that are pretty big and bulky, and they get in the way of the torso movement as well. It does feel extremely limited, especially when you compare it to like the Black Series that has less articulation but different types of material that allow the joints to move freely and for them to be functional. With the Mafex one, there's a bunch of things in the way and the articulation just doesn't work quite as good as it should. Yes, the Mafex one and the figure arts one have the double jointed elbows and double jointed knees, and obviously that stuff is always preferred, but as it is right now, I don't think that those two things were enough to get them close to the Black Series version in terms of articulation. And for scale, I think all three figures work where they're supposed to. The Mafex one does seem a little tall, but I mean, I think he still looks pretty good next to Darth Vader. The Black Series one, I think looks really good next to the Black Series Vader, and you can also put him with the Mafex Vader and he still looks pretty good. Same thing could be said for the Mafex to the Black Series, but like I said, he is just a little tall. The figure arts one is shorter than the other two, but that's typically the case when it comes to figure arts, so I can't really fault it for it. And I think in general, all three of these figures can be interchanged with different lines and stuff like that. Even though this Boba Fett is a little shorter, he's not tiny or anything, and I think he still works for a 6-inch display regardless of what line you collect, whether it's Black Series, Mafex, or figure arts. And you know, really the same thing could be said for all three figures. They aren't all exactly the same height or anything, but they all work within a 6-inch style display. And I'm not an expert on the actors' heights or anything like that, like all the various actors that have played Boba Fett and stunt people that have played Boba Fett. I don't know all their heights, so as far as like having it down to an exact science, I'm not really an expert on that, but I can say that every one of these Boba Fett figures does work really well in a 6-inch display. Okay, so this took way longer than I was expecting, so I'm going to keep my final thoughts kind of short, but let's go ahead and do a quick recap. As far as the overall look goes, I would give it to the Mafex. I think he's the best looking out of all of these figures. He has the best sculpted detail, he has the best paint work, and he looks most like Boba Fett did in the actual movies. I think the Black Series version looks really good too. He would have benefited from a bit of a paint wash, but as it is right now, it does look really good, and even with that paint wash, I don't think that it would have looked as good as the Mafex version. The Figuarts one looks nice too, but it does kind of have a stylized look to it, so I had to put him in third place. As far as the accessories go, I would give it to the Black Series only because I think that his accessories are more interesting. I like the flame effects and the blowtorch and the broken gun. All that stuff is really cool. It would have been nice if he came with extra hands, but I appreciate the fact that he came with a bunch of unique stuff. And when it comes to scale, it's kind of a tie between the three figures because all of them will work within a 6-inch scale display. If you're looking for something bigger, you'd have to go to the Diamond Select figure, but like I said before, he's kind of alone. But for 6-inch scale collections, any one of these three figures will fit, so it's kind of a tie. For articulation, I'm definitely going to give it to the Black Series because even though he has less articulation points, all his articulation is more functional and he's way more fun to play with. Alright, so after that breakdown, I think it's pretty obvious which one of these figures I like the most, and I know that not a lot of people are going to agree with me. I think most people would probably lean towards one of the import figures, but for me personally, I got the most enjoyment out of the Black Series version. I feel like most people will probably say the Mafex one is the best, and I don't think I could really argue with you, you know, like I'm not going to sit here and definitively say that the Black Series figure is the best Boba Fett figure that you could buy, but I'm telling you that the Black Series one is the one that I enjoy the most, mostly because of the fun factor. That's a big thing for me. That figure is a lot of fun to play with. He may not look as good as the Mafex one, but he's an awesome looking figure and I think that he does the job. So, like I said, in my opinion, the Black Series one is the king of the Boba Fetts. One other thing that I kind of want to discuss very quickly is the durability. I think that the Black Series figure is the most durable out of all of these. The Mafex one is great, but he's also very fragile. He's already broken on me. His rocket pack thing actually snapped on me, and I wasn't even handling the figure. I just had him on my shelf, and one day he fell over. That thing just snapped right off, so I had to repair it. And that really sucks because that's an expensive figure. And honestly, I don't really touch this figure too much because I'm afraid to break things on his rocket pack. Like these little pieces, these. I'm always afraid I'm going to break something when I'm handling this figure. Or even if he's just standing on the shelf. I feel like, you know, he might just fall over and break. So that's not pleasant when it comes to action figures. You know, you don't want your stuff to feel like it's gonna break, and I don't get that sense when it comes to the Black Series figure. I'm able to just enjoy them. I could play with it, mess around with it all day. I don't have to worry about it breaking. Plus, it's only $30. I really don't like to consider price when talking about like what figure I like the best, because I just try to base it on the quality of the figure. But damn, it's hard to ignore, you know? Like in this case, both of these figures will cost you, right now on the aftermarket price, they'll cost you probably, if you're lucky, you'll be able to find the Mafex one for like under 200 bucks or something. The Figuarts one cost me like 120. I probably could have found it cheaper, but I just got it on Amazon. But yeah, they're both expensive figures. The Black Series one is $30. So for that price, you get something that's almost as good as an import figure in terms of look, and absolutely destroys the import figures as far as posability and fun factor. So, like I said, the Black Series Deluxe Return of the Jedi Boba Fett is the Boba Fett for me. It's the one that I like the most, and it's the one that I enjoy the most. I know that a lot of people aren't going to agree, but that's okay. That's what makes these videos fun, having different opinions. So be sure to let me know which Boba Fett you like the most in the comments below. I really do look forward to hearing other people's opinions. And with that, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Also, be sure to hit the bell notification so you know every time that I go live. Thank you very much. Peace.